After 12 years of silence, Clara Moore, a successful artist, faces the most devastating moment of her life, an unexpected reunion with the daughter she abandoned as a baby. Can the bonds broken by time ever be mended, or is redemption out of reach? Clara Moore was a mixture of silence and color. To the outside world, she was a brilliant sculptor whose pieces seemed to carry the weight of universal longing and sorrow. But in New York, amidst the towering concrete and blinding lights, Clara was just a woman hiding from her past. People admired her creativity, yet no one suspected the open wound she carried in her heart. That wound had a name: Olivia. 12 years ago, Clara made a decision that would change everything. At the time, she wasn't the acclaimed artist lighting up galleries today. She was just a lost young woman battling her own demons. The first time she held Olivia in her arms, she felt an overwhelming love, but also an equally paralyzing fear. And it was that cold, sharp fear that drove her to leave her newborn daughter with Helen, her mother, and Noah, the child's father. She convinced herself that by running away, she was saving Olivia from herself. What no one knew was how deeply that escape consumed Clara from within. She poured her pain into her art, yet every sculpture seemed to whisper the truth she couldn't say aloud: regret. Themes of abandonment, lost connections, and redemption flowed from her hands into the clay. But no amount of success could fill the void Olivia had left behind. Clara's routine in New York was predictable, almost mechanical. She woke up, made coffee, and spent hours in her studio, shaping clay as though she could sculpt her way to forgiveness. But at night, when the silence became deafening, she was left alone with her memories. Those memories made her wonder if she would ever be able to fix what she had broken. Helen and Noah were like ghosts in her mind. Clara imagined them constantly but never had the courage to reach out. How could she? The weight of guilt was suffocating, and the shame paralyzing. She wondered if Noah hated her, if Helen still thought of her as a daughter. But most of all, she wondered if Olivia, now a 12-year-old girl, would even know who she was. No matter how much she tried to bury them, memories of Olivia haunted her. Clara could still recall the sweet smell of her newborn skin, the feeling of holding her for the last time. It was like a faded photograph in her mind, a moment frozen in time. Clara had believed she was doing the right thing back then, but that didn't make her decision any less heavy. Deep down, she knew her art was a silent plea for forgiveness, sent out into a universe that might never answer. Every exhibition, every glowing review was a reminder of the success she had achieved at the cost of something priceless. And yet, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. As if her past was ready to find her. That ordinary afternoon, Clara was sketching ideas in a park. The fresh air felt like an invitation to confront the choices she had made and the consequences she had avoided. As she shaped images in her mind, something in the distance made her freeze. Her breath caught, and the world seemed to slow down. It was a girl playing frisbee with a man and an older woman. Clara blinked, thinking her mind was playing tricks on her. But the resemblance was undeniable. That girl, there was something about her, something Clara knew. Something that made her feel as though the past was shouting her name. And before she could even process it, she knew, the world as she knew it was about to crumble. The gentle wind carried the earthy smell of damp grass and fallen leaves as Clara sat on a wooden bench, her sketchbook resting on her lap. Her pen moved across the page almost automatically, drawing shapes that only made sense in her tangled thoughts. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement. Something unremarkable, just people playing in the distance. And then she saw her. It was a simple scene but powerful in its quiet intensity. A girl laughed as she tossed a frisbee to a man and a woman. Clara almost looked away, as she would from any stranger. But something made her stop. It was like a spark, an inexplicable recognition. Her eyes locked onto the girl, on her smile, on the awkward way she ran after the frisbee. Every detail seemed to shout a single truth. It was Olivia. Clara's heart raced faster than she could control. For a moment, she wondered if this was real or if her mind was playing a cruel trick. After all, she had only seen Olivia through the photos Helen had sent in the early years. But now, there she was in the flesh, the girl Clara had left behind. Clara couldn't move, she couldn't look away. Noah was there too. He looked older, with hints of gray at his temples, but his presence was unmistakable. Helen sat nearby in a lawn chair, watching with a mix of affection and vigilance. Seeing them together sent a pang through Clara's chest. They looked like a family, the family Clara should have been part of, but wasn't. The reality of the scene was suffocating. Clara tried to look away, but her eyes kept returning to Olivia as if they were magnetized. The girl had features so similar to hers, the same shape of the eyes, the same distracted way of tossing the frisbee without much precision. It was like staring at a younger version of herself, but with a light she had long since lost. For a moment, Clara almost stood up. Something inside her screamed to go to them, to call Olivia's name, to hold her. But fear held her in place like invisible chains. What would she say? How could she justify so many years of silence? Every step felt like an impossible chasm to cross. And so, she just sat there, watching, a stranger in her own life. As the scene unfolded, Clara felt the tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. It wasn't just sadness, it was the crushing weight of regret she had carried for over a decade. Everything she had done to bury the past was unraveling in front of her. Olivia didn't need to know who she was. But Clara knew exactly who Olivia was. And that broke her. She stayed on that bench longer than she could count, until Olivia and the others began to walk away. As they disappeared from view, Clara felt an even greater emptiness than before. It was as if she had been given a glimpse of what could have been, only to lose it again. Her mind was a whirlwind. She knew that after this, nothing would ever be the same. The walk home was silent, except for the storm of thoughts echoing like thunder in Clara's mind. She felt small, powerless. That girl, the one she had only seen from afar, was the biggest piece missing in her life. But what could she do? After so much time, would it be selfish to try and step into Olivia's life now? Or was it cowardly not to try? As she sat on her bed, Clara looked down at her hands, calloused from years of working with clay. Those hands had shaped countless sculptures, telling stories she couldn't put into words. But could they help her mold something that was broken beyond repair? She didn't know. What she did know, however, was that the past she had feared for so long was now closer than ever, breathing down her neck. Clara couldn't sleep that night. Olivia's face, so similar to her own, seemed to appear in every shadow of the room, as if the past had come alive to watch her. The thought of going to her felt like climbing an insurmountable mountain. The shame of having disappeared, of never offering an explanation, was a weight that pinned her to the bed. She wondered if she even had the right to reopen a wound that Olivia might not even realize existed. The next morning, Clara buried herself in her work, as she always did when emotions threatened to overflow. In her studio, she kneaded the clay with firm gestures, trying to give shape to something she couldn't name. Yet, no matter how her hands moved, her mind was elsewhere. The image of Olivia playing, the echo of her laughter that Clara could almost hear, mingled with the crushing weight of guilt. Every turn of the pottery wheel felt like a confrontation with her past. She rehearsed countless conversations in her mind. She pictured herself showing up at Helen's door, imagined what it would be like to face Noah after so many years. But every scenario ended with the same outcome: rejection, a door slammed in her face. The doubt gnawed at her. What if they didn't forgive her? What if Olivia hated her? Clara thought she had faced her share of pain, but this fear was different, deeper. It was the fear of being discarded by the one person who mattered most. As she tried to escape these thoughts, Helen's voice echoed in her memory. A faint recollection from her childhood, when Helen often said that one had to face their mistakes to grow. Clara wondered if her mother still believed in that. After everything that had happened, would Helen still have the strength to look her in the eye? Or did she see Clara as a coward? The uncertainty was like a knife, cutting deeper with every thought. Clara wandered the city that day, as if walking could help her think. Every street corner seemed to offer an excuse to give up, a reason to ignore what she had seen in the park. She could carry on with her life, bury it all again. But something inside her screamed that this was no longer an option. And yet, fear made her hesitate, a constant voice whispering that maybe it was already too late. When she finally returned home, exhausted, she picked up her phone. 4 minutes, she stared at Helen's number, saved in her contacts for years but never dialed. Her fingers hovered over the keys, but her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. She typed and deleted messages over and over, each one emptier than the last. In the end, she threw the phone onto the table and turned away, tears streaming down her face. The mere act of trying felt unbearable. That night, Clara sat by the window, staring at the city lights. Each glowing point reminded her of how much her life had changed, and how much it had stayed the same. On the outside, she was a successful artist, celebrated and admired. But on the inside, she was still the same lost girl, unable to fix what was broken. She wondered if she even deserved the chance to try. The hesitation consumed her thoughts. Clara offered herself excuses. Maybe Olivia was happier without her. Maybe Noah and Helen had done a far better job than she ever could have. But those justifications felt hollow. The truth was that she was scared. Scared to confront the damage her absence had caused, scared of being rejected. The past felt like a prison, and Clara was its only jailer. Even so, a tiny spark began to grow. It wasn't a plan yet, but it refused to be ignored. Clara knew she couldn't keep living like this, caught between what she should do and what she feared to face. Something had to change. But what and how were questions she still didn't have answers for. The next day, Clara walked into her usual cafe, a small and cozy place with the aroma of roasted beans and soft music in the background. Sitting in the corner, as always, was Lydia, her friend and confidant. Lydia had a way of looking at people that seemed to cut through layers of pretense, as though she could hear unspoken words. Clara sighed as she sat down. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Lydia said, already anticipating the conversation to come. Clara didn't need much prompting to spill everything. She described the encounter at the park, the overwhelming emotions, and her paralyzing fear of facing Helen, Noah, and, most terrifying of all, Olivia. Lydia listened quietly, sipping her tea, as Clara poured out every ounce of her anguish. When she finally stopped, Lydia set her cup down, crossed her arms, and spoke with the calm clarity Clara had always admired. "You know running away again isn't going to solve this, right? What do I do then?" Clara asked, her voice nearly pleading. "They hate me and they're right to. Olivia has no idea who I am. How can I just show up and destroy their world all over again?" Lydia shook her head, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "You're not going to destroy anything, Clara. What's done is done. But you can start to rebuild. The first step is to accept that their forgiveness doesn't depend on you, but your courage does." Lydia's words hit Clara like a shock. Courage. Honesty. Those were the things she had avoided for so long. Admitting the fear that had consumed her, the love that had paralyzed her, and the choice she had made thinking it was for Olivia's good. Clara felt a lump in her throat because she knew Lydia was right. But were words enough? Would Noah, Helen, or Olivia even listen? "You don't need to fix everything all at once," Lydia continued, her voice soft yet steady. "Just start. Talk to Helen. She's your mother, Clara. She might not understand everything right away, but I think she'll listen. And Noah, he's going to need time. Don't expect this to be easy. But you're not doing this because it's easy, you're doing it because it's necessary." Clara bit her lip, lost in thought. She knew Lydia was right. Deep down, she'd always known this moment would come, even though she had done everything in her power to delay it. What terrified her wasn't just the confrontation, it was the uncertainty. There were no guarantees, no promises that she would be accepted or that her efforts would make any difference. Still, something in Lydia's tone made Clara want to believe, if only for a fleeting moment. "And Olivia?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. Lydia gave her a faint smile. "Olivia is young, Claire. She might feel angry, she probably will, but children have a gift we lose as we grow up. They know how to forgive. But you have to prove you're worth it. Not with pretty words, but with actions. Be the mother she deserves now, because that's the only thing you can do." Clara left the cafe with a heavy heart, but something was different this time. There was a small spark, a fragile fragment of courage Lydia had planted. Maybe it was time to face what she had feared for so long. Not for herself, but for Olivia, for Helen, and even for Noah. And deep down, for herself. It was a small step, but it was more than she had taken in years. As she walked home, Lydia's words echoed in Clara's mind: honesty, courage, action. Those words became a silent mantra as she tried to imagine what to say, how to begin. The doubts were still there, of course, and the fear hadn't disappeared. But now, at least, she had something she hadn't before. A plan, or at least the beginning of one. Clara couldn't remember the last time she had been to Helen's house. As she drove through the city streets, the anxiety inside her grew tighter, like a knot in her chest. That house, which should have been a refuge, had become a painful reminder of everything she had left behind. When she finally parked outside, her hands trembled. She sat in the car for long minutes, staring at the door, trying to summon the courage to get out. The house looked the same, with its neatly kept garden and the swing Clara remembered from her childhood. But now it felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to another life. She took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked slowly to the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she finally rang the bell, Clara thought her heart might explode from her chest. And then the door opened. It was Noah who answered. The shock on his face was unmistakable, but it quickly hardened into an expression of guarded hostility. "Clara," he said, his tone laced with disbelief and bitterness. For a moment, she couldn't find the words. Everything she had rehearsed vanished from her mind. "I need to talk to you," she managed to say, her voice barely more than a whisper. Noah hesitated, clearly torn between anger and curiosity. He stepped aside, reluctantly allowing her in. Helen was in the living room, sitting in her favorite armchair. When she saw Clara, her face froze for a moment before softening into a mix of surprise and concern. "Clara?" she asked, as if she needed confirmation that she wasn't imagining things. Clara felt tears well up in her eyes. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice trembling. Helen stood, but she didn't approach Clara. She simply waited, her expression unreadable. The room felt heavy with unspoken words. Clara could feel the weight of Noah and Helen's eyes on her, their emotions simmering just beneath the surface. She knew there was no easy way to begin, but she also knew she had to try. "I know my being here is a shock," she began, her voice faltering but determined. "And I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but I had to come. I had to try to explain." Noah crossed his arms, his skepticism clear. Helen stayed silent, waiting. Clara took a deep breath and continued. "I did something unforgivable. I know that. But back then I really thought I was doing what was best for Olivia. I wasn't ready. I had nothing to offer her. I thought you could give her what I couldn't. But now I see that all I did was leave a scar on all of us." Her voice broke, but she refused to look away. This was her moment of vulnerability, and she knew she couldn't run from it. Noah was the first to speak. "Do you think saying this makes it better?" he asked, his voice sharp with pain. "You disappeared, Clara. You left me to raise our daughter alone, and now you show up, expecting what? Forgiveness?" Clara flinched at his words, but she knew he was right. "I don't expect everything to be okay," she replied. "I just want a chance to do what I should have done before." Helen finally spoke, her tone gentler but still firm. "Why now, Clara? What's changed?" Clara met her mother's eyes, feeling the weight of the question. "Because I can't live with this anymore. Seeing Olivia, even from a distance, made me realize I can't keep running. I know I hurt you, and I know it might be too late. But I need to try." Helen sighed, her expression conflicted but slightly less distant. Noah, however, remained rigid. The conversation lasted longer than Clara had expected, every word an uphill battle against years of silence and pain. Noah was relentless, questioning her motives, while Helen wavered between anger and understanding. Clara realized this wouldn't be easy, but something in her honesty seemed to crack small openings in their defenses. Small, but enough to keep going. When Clara finally left the house, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult road. But for the first time in years, she felt like she had taken a step. A small, hesitant step, but a real one. The past still loomed over her, but now she was ready to face it. And deep down, she knew the next challenge was only just beginning. Helen, meanwhile, found herself torn between supporting Clara and protecting Olivia. Although she displayed moments of warmth, she didn't hide her lingering pain. "You have to understand that this isn't just about Olivia accepting you," Helen said in a candid conversation. "It's about showing all of us that you're here to stay. Wanting it isn't enough. You need to earn it." Those words echoed in Clara's mind, a constant reminder of how much work was still ahead. Clara also wrestled with her own emotions. The crushing weight of guilt, the doubts about her place in Olivia's life, and the anger she sometimes felt toward herself for running away. Sam, ever perceptive, noticed her internal struggle and offered her straightforward advice. "Use what you feel. You're an artist, Claire. Maybe your art can help you say the things words can't." It was a simple suggestion, but it planted a seed of possibility. Despite all the challenges, small moments of progress began to emerge. One afternoon, as Clara helped Olivia with a school art project, the girl hesitantly asked for her opinion. "Do you think this looks good?" Olivia said, almost reluctantly. Clara could hardly believe the words but replied calmly, pointing out ways the work could be improved. The moment was brief, but to Clara, it was a sign, however faint, that there was still hope. The weeks that followed tested Clara's patience and resolve. She knew that every conversation, every small gesture, was a chance to prove she had changed. But she also knew she couldn't rush anything. Trust, especially from Noah and Olivia, was something that had to be built brick by brick. Yet, amidst the difficulties, Clara rediscovered something she thought she had lost long ago: a reason to keep fighting. Clara began spending more time at Helen's house, though the atmosphere was still fragile, like walking on glass that could shatter at any moment. While there were fleeting moments of connection with Olivia, most of their interactions were brief and tense. Noah, though allowing Clara's presence, kept an emotional wall firmly in place. "If you hurt her again, I'll never forgive you," he warned one day. Clara knew he wasn't bluffing, but it was one quiet afternoon that shifted the dynamic. Sitting together in the backyard, Helen finally broke the silence between them. "Clara, you've never really told me what happened back then," she said, her voice calm but tinged with a sadness Clara could recognize. It was an invitation, but also a challenge. Clara's heart raced. Talking about the past meant revisiting wounds she had spent years burying. Still, there was something in Helen's tone that urged her to be honest. "I was so scared," Clara began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared I wasn't enough, that I would fail as a mother. I watched you raise me and my siblings all on your own, always so strong. But I wasn't like you. I felt weak, broken. When Olivia was born, I loved her with everything I had, but I also felt like I was drowning. So I ran." The words came out with tears, each one a mixture of pain and relief. Helen listened without interrupting, though her eyes were filled with a mix of understanding and hurt. "I did everything I could for you, Clara," she said, her voice steady but tender. "But maybe I made mistakes too. Maybe I expected you to be strong too soon." Clara looked at her mother, surprised by the admission. For the first time, she felt that Helen was opening a door, not just to her as a daughter, but as a woman who had also made mistakes. That moment of honesty with Helen became a turning point for Clara. But she knew the hardest conversation was still ahead. The following weekend, Noah suggested that Clara attend one of Olivia's soccer practices. It was an opportunity to connect but also a test. Clara agreed, even though her stomach churned with nerves. When she arrived at the field, she saw Olivia laughing with her friends in the distance. For the first time, Clara realized there was a joy in her daughter's life that she didn't know. When Olivia noticed her, her expression changed. It wasn't anger, but there was a certain tightness in her lips that spoke of resistance. Clara gave her a small wave, not expecting much in return. But to her surprise, Olivia didn't ignore her completely. After practice, as everyone packed up, Olivia approached her, clutching her bag tightly. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. Clara offered a gentle smile. "Because I want to see you." Olivia didn't respond but didn't walk away either. Clara seized the moment, offering to carry her bag, which Olivia reluctantly handed over. It was a small, almost insignificant gesture, but to Clara, it was a step. "You're really good at soccer," she said, trying to spark a conversation. Olivia shrugged, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Clara realized that the road ahead was still long, but small moments like this could make all the difference. As Clara worked to reconnect with Olivia, she also had to navigate her strained relationship with Noah, who still carried deep wounds. One evening, he called her aside for a direct conversation. "I don't trust you, Clara." "Not yet. But I'm not going to stop you from trying. Just know that if you hurt her again, I won't let it go." Clara nodded, accepting his words without protest. She knew Noah was right to protect Olivia. "I don't expect you to trust me yet," she replied. "But I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm here to stay." In the days that followed, Clara turned to her work as an outlet for her emotions. She began a new series of sculptures, this time exploring the theme of rebuilding. Each piece told a story of broken fragments finding a way to exist anew. Sam, who often stopped by her studio, noticed the shift in her art. "You're pouring your heart into this, Clara," he said. "And that's exactly what you need to show Olivia." The past still loomed over her like a shadow, but for the first time, Clara felt she was starting to confront it. Her conversation with Helen, the small connection with Olivia, and the tentative truce with Noah were signs that, even though the road ahead was long, there was hope. Clara knew the next steps would demand more courage than she thought she had, but she also knew she couldn't turn back now. Olivia finally looked at Clara again, her expression unreadable. "I need to think," she said before walking away to join her friends. Clara felt a mix of relief and sadness. It wasn't the outcome she'd hoped for, but it wasn't the worst either. Olivia hadn't completely rejected the possibility of reconnecting. It was a beginning, albeit a hesitant one. That night, back at her studio, Clara collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. The conversation with Olivia had been one of the hardest moments of her life, but also one of the most honest. She knew there was still so much work to do, so many barriers to overcome. But that confrontation, despite its pain, had cracked open a small window for something greater, the possibility of redemption. Staring at an unfinished sculpture on the table in front of her, Clara felt something different. It wasn't the suffocating pain she'd carried for years, but a spark of hope. For the first time, she began to believe that maybe it was possible to rebuild what had been broken. And even though the road ahead would be long, Clara was ready to take it, one step at a time. The days following the confrontation at the exhibition were quiet but full of meaning. Clara kept a respectful distance, waiting for Olivia to decide the next move. Surprisingly, it was Olivia who made the first gesture. One afternoon, while Clara was in her studio, she received an unexpected text from Helen. "Olivia wants you to help her with a school project. Are you free today?" Clara nearly dropped the phone in shock, her heart racing. It was the closest thing to an invitation she'd ever received from her daughter. When Clara arrived at Helen's house that afternoon, she found Olivia already waiting, colored pencils scattered across the table. "You got here fast," Olivia said, trying to mask the nervousness in her voice. Clara smiled as she sat beside her. "I wasn't going to miss this opportunity." The project was a poster titled, "What is Family?" and Clara couldn't ignore the symbolic weight of the task. It wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to make the most of the moment. As they worked together, the tension between them began to ease, replaced by tentative exchanges of ideas and even a few smiles. "You're pretty good at drawing," Olivia said, almost casually. Clara held back the urge to overreact and simply replied, "I think you got that from me." Olivia gave a faint smile but didn't comment further, focusing back on the poster. It was a subtle moment, but for Clara, it felt like a small victory. By the end of the afternoon, the poster was nearly complete, vibrant with colors and words cut out from magazines. Olivia hesitated before looking at Clara and asking, "Do you think people can fix things, even after a long time?" Clara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the question. "I think that if people really want to, yes. It's not easy, but it's possible." Olivia nodded slightly as if pondering the response, before quietly putting away the art supplies. Helen had been watching from a distance, her expression a mix of tenderness and caution. As Clara prepared to leave, Helen walked her to the door. "What you did today was good," she said quietly, so Olivia wouldn't overhear. "She's still confused, but these little things, they matter." Clara nodded, barely holding back tears. "I just want her to know I'm here whenever she needs me." That day marked the start of a new phase. Clara began to be included in moments that once seemed impossible. Helen invited her to family dinners, and while Noah remained guarded, he allowed Clara to accompany Olivia to school events. Small moments of shared time gradually built a foundation of trust, brick by brick. Clara knew she couldn't rush anything, but each gesture, no matter how small, felt like a step in the right direction. During a walk in the park, Olivia did something that left Clara speechless. As they strolled, Olivia reached for Clara's hand for just a few seconds before quickly letting go, as if it had been an instinctive gesture. Clara didn't comment, but her heart swelled with warmth. It was the first spontaneous sign of affection Olivia had shown since they reunited. Clara cherished that moment like a treasure, something to keep her moving forward. The relationship with Noah also began to shift, albeit slowly. One evening, as Clara and Olivia worked on a drawing together, Noah walked through the room and paused briefly. "You're doing well with her," he said without meeting Clara's eyes. It was a brief comment, but Clara knew the weight it carried. Noah was starting to lower his defenses, even if only slightly. Clara noticed changes within herself as well. The guilt was still there, but now it was accompanied by something stronger, a sense of purpose. Each moment with Olivia became an opportunity to rebuild not just her relationship with her daughter but also her relationship with herself. Clara no longer saw herself as the runaway but as someone learning to face her fears. And that was liberating. Though the journey was far from over, Clara felt she was finally achieving something that once seemed impossible, a real connection with Olivia. Every small gesture of closeness was a valuable reward, the fruit of her sincere effort. But Clara knew the true transformation was still ahead, and the work of rebuilding was only just beginning. Clara made a life-changing decision. She decided to move to a neighborhood closer to Olivia. Until then, every visit and shared moment had been limited by both physical and emotional distance. Living nearby felt like more than just a convenience, it was a commitment. She found a small apartment, simple but cozy, where she could continue her work and be readily available for her daughter. When Olivia heard the news, her reaction was mixed. "You're moving here now?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and caution. Clara responded with a gentle smile. "Only if you're okay with it." The new routine brought unexpected opportunities. Clara began picking Olivia up from school occasionally, creating moments for spontaneous conversations and even laughter. One day, as they walked home, Olivia stopped in front of an art supply store. "Will you teach me to sculpt someday?" she asked almost casually. Clara felt her chest warm as if those words were a gift she never thought she'd receive. "Of course, whenever you want," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion bubbling inside. Clara also became involved in community projects, offering art workshops for local children and teenagers. Using her skills to help others brought a renewed sense of purpose to her life and served as a way to show Olivia that her commitment extended beyond their relationship. Sometimes Olivia accompanied Clara to the workshops, quietly observing as her mother worked with other kids. Over time, her curiosity grew into participation, and soon Olivia was helping with the classes herself. Noah watched these changes with cautious optimism, though his guard remained up. One day, as they picked Olivia up from a school event, he finally spoke openly about the past. "I didn't think you'd ever come back. I thought your absence would be permanent." Clara stopped walking for a moment and turned to face him. "I thought that too, Noah. But something changed. I changed. And all I want now is to do what's right." Noah nodded, and while his words were few, the weight of his silent acceptance was unmistakable. The small breakthroughs in Clara's relationship with Olivia began to reflect in her sculptures. She created a series called Reconstruction, featuring pieces that symbolized broken parts coming together in unexpected yet harmonious ways. One of them, a sculpture resembling an embrace, caught Olivia's attention during a visit to Clara's studio. "Is this supposed to be us?" she asked, touching the piece carefully. Clara smiled, surprised by her daughter's sensitivity. "It's what I hope we can be," she replied, her voice filled with sincerity. At home, Clara and Olivia started to share moments that became small rituals. Afternoons spent drawing, walks in the park, and even improvised cooking sessions with Helen. The family dynamic wasn't perfect, but it had its own beauty. One evening, during dinner, Olivia surprised everyone by saying, "I think we're a different kind of family now, but that's okay." The simplicity of her words left Clara in tears, while Helen and Noah exchanged knowing glances. Despite the progress, Clara knew challenges still lay ahead. In a candid conversation with Helen, she admitted, "Sometimes it still feels like I'm walking through a minefield, not knowing where to step." With her usual calm wisdom, Helen replied, "The only thing that matters is that you're walking, Clara. That's more than many people do." Those words stayed with Clara, a reminder that progress didn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. Clara also began to include Olivia in her creative process. One afternoon, as they worked on sculptures together, Olivia asked, "Do you think I could be an artist like you?" Clara paused, putting down her tools to meet her daughter's gaze. "I think you can be anything you want to be. You have a light, Olivia. And if art is what you choose, I know you'll shine." For the first time, Olivia smiled in a way that showed she felt her mother's pride. Each day brought new lessons, new ways to connect. Clara knew there were still rough edges to smooth in their relationship, but they now had a foundation, something solid to build on. As she walked home one evening, Olivia's laughter echoing beside her, Clara realized that the journey wasn't just about repairing the past. It was about creating a future they could share, hand in hand. When Olivia's birthday arrived, it filled the house with contagious energy. Helen hosted the party at her home, decorating it with vibrant colors and personal touches that reflected Olivia's lively personality. Clara arrived early to help, a gesture that, months ago, would have been unthinkable. As she hung balloons and arranged the dessert table, she felt like she was finally part of something she had thought was out of reach, a family. While Helen and Noah still held some reservations, their interactions with Clara carried a new lightness, as if the heavy weight of the past was slowly being set down. As guests began to arrive, Clara watched Olivia from a distance, laughing with her friends and moving with the boundless energy of a happy child. It was a moment of pure joy, but also one of reflection. Clara knew she hadn't yet fully earned the title of mother in Olivia's life, but for the first time, she felt a bridge being built. Every gesture, every exchanged smile, was a brick in that path. Noah, ever observant, approached Clara as she arranged the presents. "You're doing well," he said, his honesty catching her off guard. She looked at him, almost incredulous. "Thank you. That means a lot, coming from you." Noah hesitated, as though weighing something significant, before adding, "Olivia's happier with you around. I still worry, but I think she's starting to feel like she can trust you." During the birthday song, Olivia surprised Clara in a way that left her breathless. She grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her to stand beside Helen and Noah at the center of the circle. It was a simple gesture, yet heavy with meaning. As they sang, Clara fought back tears, feeling for the first time that she wasn't just a guest but a part of Olivia's inner circle. After the cake, Olivia called Clara over, holding something behind her back. "I made this for you," she said, revealing a small drawing. It was a simple scene, but Clara recognized it immediately, the two of them sitting on a park bench, surrounded by trees. In the corner of the drawing, one word was written in colorful letters: family. Clara couldn't hold back her tears. "It's beautiful, Olivia. This is the most special gift I've ever received." Olivia shrugged nonchalantly, but there was a spark in her eyes that Clara had never seen before. That night, after the guests had left, the four of them, Helen, Noah, Olivia, and Clara, sat together in the living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and leftover cake. The atmosphere was calm, as though the outside world didn't exist. Olivia rested her head on Clara's shoulder, a gesture so spontaneous it took everyone by surprise. Helen and Noah exchanged a glance, and Clara, holding her breath, stayed perfectly still, savoring a moment that felt like a dream. Helen broke the silence with a light laugh. "Well, I think this means you're officially back, Claire." Everyone laughed, and Noah, with a faint smile, added, Don't screw it up. Clara nodded, her heart full. I won't, she said, with a determination that surprised even herself. For the first time, she felt she had crossed a threshold. Whatever the future held, Clara knew she would never walk away again. The journey to that moment had been full of challenges, but Clara realized each one had prepared her for this. It wasn't just about rebuilding her relationship with Olivia, it was about forgiving herself and understanding that she was more than her mistakes. That birthday, in all its simplicity, was not just a celebration of Olivia, it was a celebration of a new beginning. For the first time, Clara felt that the resurrection of her bond with her daughter wasn't just a possibility. It was real. In the quiet hours after the party, as they packed away the decorations, Helen stopped beside Clara in the kitchen. You did well today, she said with a faint smile. Clara smiled back. I had good examples. Helen nodded, her voice filled with emotion. Welcome back, daughter. The weight of those words hit Clara like a warm wave, filling the empty spaces in her heart. She knew the work wasn't done, but for the first time, she felt she was exactly where she needed to be. The days following Olivia's birthday were marked by a peace Clara hadn't felt in years. There were still edges to smooth and wounds to heal, but the relationships with her daughter and her family were transforming in ways she never thought possible. For the first time, Clara felt there was room for love, for rebuilding, and most importantly, for forgiveness. Not just forgiveness from Olivia, Noah, and Helen, but the hardest one of all, forgiveness for herself. Clara continued to take an active role in Olivia's life. She was there for school events, art-filled afternoons, and even soccer games, despite not understanding the rules. It wasn't about knowing the details, it was about showing Olivia that she wasn't going anywhere this time. The girl, once so guarded, began to open up. Their conversations grew longer, her smiles more frequent, and even the hardest questions began to surface. Are you still scared? Olivia asked one day. Clara paused before answering. Yes. But I don't let the fear stop me anymore. This process brought profound changes to Clara's work as well. Her sculptures took on a softer, more hopeful tone. One piece, in particular, stood out at a local exhibition, a mother and daughter sitting together with their hands intertwined. When asked about the inspiration, Clara simply said, "It's about reunions." The piece became a symbol of her journey, and when Olivia saw it for the first time, she whispered, "It looks like us." The relationship with Noah also found a new foundation. He remained protective of Olivia, but his interactions with Clara became easier, almost amicable. One afternoon, as they waited for Olivia to leave school, Noah turned to Clara and said, "I never thought we'd get here. But I think you're proving that you deserve to be in her life." His words were simple, but for Clara, they meant everything. "Thank you for giving me this chance," she replied sincerely. Helen, meanwhile, became a constant pillar of support. Their relationship, once marked by emotional distance, evolved into something closer and more nurturing. "I see how much you've changed, Clara," Helen said during a quiet evening. "And it makes me proud. You're showing Olivia that even when we make mistakes, we can find our way back." Clara smiled, letting Helen's words sink in like a balm for her soul. But the greatest lessons came from Olivia. One afternoon, as they painted together in the studio, Olivia suddenly stopped and looked at Clara. "You're going to stay with me forever now, right?" Clara felt tears well up before she could respond. "I will, Olivia. Always." It was a simple moment, yet it carried everything Clara had been working toward for months, her daughter's acceptance and the promise of a shared future. Clara understood that the past would never be erased, but she also realized it didn't have to define who she was. The journey that began with guilt and regret had transformed into one of hope and redemption. The bond with Olivia was far from perfect, but it was being built on a solid foundation, brick by brick. Clara learned that love doesn't have to be instant or unconditional to be real, it only needs to be sincere. As Clara walked through the park on a sunny afternoon with Olivia and Noah, she felt grateful. Grateful for the reunion, for the challenges, and for every small moment that had led her to this point. The journey hadn't erased the mistakes of the past, but it had turned them into something stronger, a renewed connection with the people who mattered most. Clara didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, she realized she didn't need them. She had love, effort, and most importantly, a second chance.